I recognized to a degree that I was a people pleaser, but I thought it was a good thing. But I didn't realize all the ways that it was robbing me. I was just riddled with anxiety and low self-esteem, and I coped with alcohol, and I was always focused on trying to get external validation, which is a big, big problem, and it's never going to fulfill you. And, attention from men and just all these negative things that I was trying to fill a void, but I didn't know what the void was.
Hello and welcome to the Going Courage podcast, where I talk to real people about real life, trying to gain some insights from their experiences building courage. On today's episode, I'm joined by Brianne, who is a life coach out in Vancouver, Canada. She's also the founder of Diary of a People Pleaser. So if you're someone who struggles with people pleasing, maybe you're not very good at setting boundaries, then this might be the episode for you. Hey Brianne, welcome to the Going Courage podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, actually. I've had a little bit of a break from podcasting, so I'm really glad to be back today. And you're my first guest coming back.
And I'm
so
happy
excited
to be your first guest. Thanks for having me.
So usually on the podcast, I ask people what their name means because I'm just fascinated with name meanings. So your name's Brianne.
Yes.
Do you know what it means?
Well, I do now because you researched it for me, and I had to say thank you so much for doing that because I didn't actually know. I mean, I always hear it's the feminine Brian, right? So that doesn't really leave much to feeling wonderful about. But I can't remember now what it said, but it was basically just being a leader and being a light is what I got from it. And I was like, wow, that's exactly how I would always have described myself and something that I'm walking into. And it just kind of like made sense. So I was happy to see that.
Cool. Yeah, I've got the description here. It's Brianne is a feminine name of Irish origin, meaning high, noble, or exalted, which is like
I know,
very cool.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, might or power, so a symbolic of strength and influence.
Yeah.
Traits that inspire a natural leader, and I love that is how you see yourself as well. So it's kind of like that word has been spoken over you your whole life.
Yeah,
that's what you stepped into.
Yeah. And I didn't even know it. So thank you.
Know it. Okay. So if you got one thing out of this podcast today, it was that.
That was that. Yeah, I'm going to take that with me. Thank you.
Okay, so for people who are tuning in, can you tell us a little bit about where you are right now, where you grew up, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver in British Columbia, Canada, so far away from you. But I've lived here my whole life, and my parents literally live 2 blocks away. I've never left my little community here, so I'm a creature of habit. I like to be comfortable, and this is where I was raised.
Okay, all right. And then the family dynamics, do you have brothers, sisters, only child?
So my parents were both married before and both had a child in their first marriage. So I have 2 half siblings, but they're both older. So I always felt like an only child growing up. So it was an interesting dynamic where you do have siblings, but the dynamics in the home feel like an only child. And so it was definitely different.
Okay, all right. And if they were a lot older, were you able to get away with stuff and, get some extra pocket money from them or something like that?
You know what? I feel like it was a double-edged sword. So because I was the only one that belonged to both my parents, I was the one that they could both, discipline and come down on and have expectations of, because when it's a half, the other parent gets a little more defensive over that child, right? So, but with me, I was both. But with that said, being the baby and being the one at home, all the stuff, then I do feel like I probably got away with more or just got spoiled a little bit more. So kind of a double-edged sword there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so thinking back to that sort of time as a young girl, did you have a dream? Did you envision a future for yourself back then?
You know what? I didn't. I just always had deep, deep empathy. And so I knew that I was like a lover and caring and just wanted to help people. So when I was a child, I didn't know yet in what capacity, but as I grew into that, I realized that counseling and coaching and helping people was really what I was the most passionate about.
Amazing. Okay. And when do you feel that kind of sort of grabbed a hold of you?
I want to say in my early 20s. So probably in a time where I needed a counselor more than I could have offered counseling to anybody. But I just knew that was what was in my heart and what I wanted to do, and just started taking actionable steps towards that. So it's been a long process, and I've picked it up and put it down because I've had kids. I have 3 kids. And so just starting to get back on that path again.
Right. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Yes, I also have 3 children, so I can identify with some of the challenges that comes with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but you wouldn't change it for the world, right? It's
no,
amazing.
Absolutely not. And I feel like becoming a mother and walking that has actually given me a lot of different perspectives that you can take into helping other people, right? Every time that we can get a new perspective on something, then we're able to offer that space for somebody else. So if anything, it's just helped. And I've been really intentional about wanting to have this time to be a mom because we know how fast it goes. And I want to be 100% as present as possible now, because I don't want to look back when they're older and be like, I wish I had more time, or I wish I had done things differently, or enjoyed it more. So I'm really enjoying this balanced pace of being a mom, but also growing my business and coaching others and helping other people on their journeys.
Okay, great. And so we looked at what it was that you aspired to do, and fast forward to today, what do you actually do now? It sounds like the two aligned, and you stayed on that journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I am a life coach, and I'm also completing my degree in psychology to go on to my master's. So I want to be a registered clinical counselor in Canada. So that's what I'm working towards, and it's all coming together. It's going well.
Nice, I like it.
Yeah,
happy for you.
Thank you.
Excellent. I know we're going to talk about courage today, but before we get there, I thought it'd be really cool for people to kind of get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. So we've heard a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
So here's, I'm just going to get my questions up here. Here's a little dive into some quick fire questions if you're up for it.
Okay.
All right. So don't think too much to see what comes out.
Okay.
So what's your favorite food?
Cake.
Cake? Oh, is there any particular type of cake?
I mean, I would just want to say sugar. Like if there's just a food group, I'm desserts. I'm all about desserts. So in any form, in a more general capacity, I would say carbs of any kind.
Okay. Are you an iPhone or an Android person?
iPhone.
Oh, yeah, you're cool. Preferred clothing choice?
Comfortable.
Comfy.
Yeah.
Hoodies and sort of
comfy,
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Favorite place?
The forest.
Ooh, the forest.
Yeah.
All right, pardon my ignorance here. I haven't been to Vancouver. Are there plenty of forests to choose to walk through?
I mean, we live in the most incredible place because we have beautiful ocean with the mountains overlooking it, and we have a lot of beautiful lakes. So my preference would be a forest alongside a lake because it's just gorgeous to look at. But I just find there's just so much peace and calm when you walk into a forest.
Yeah, fair. Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Star sign, if you're into that sort of thing.
Would that be Aries? Would that be like birth
Aries,
sign?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you're Aries.
I mean, I'm not really so into it, but that's just what I would be, which is the ram, and it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a fire sign. Planet of war, I think. Planet of Mars or something like that. But anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was supposed to be Pisces, which is very like feelings and water and like calm and all that kind of stuff. But I ended up being a few weeks late, born into Aries. So I feel like I'm the exact both. I feel like I'm very empathetic and calm and wanting to help. But then I'm also very competitive and strong and very ram-like. So it's interesting how the two tie together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you a cat person or a dog person?
You know what? I have one of each. So it's a really hard question to pick. I mean, on a whole, I would say probably dogs. But if you ask me to pick between the two I have, I couldn't. They're both amazing. Yeah.
Both is an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
That's fine. And what's the last movie you watched? Was it a hit or a miss?
You know what? I can't remember the last movie I watched. I think it has to be some sort of Disney movie, I would think. Oh, you know what? Inside Out 2 would be the last one I watched.
Okay.
And
Right.
it was a hit for sure because, I mean, anybody that's working in the world of psychology loves going inside to the emotions of what kids are experiencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't quite got around to that one.
It's a really good one. Yeah.
A TV show or a book that you're into at the moment that you're reading?
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen it, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's...
Oh my gosh. Love Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
I mean, I'm watching it now for the 10th time because it's just, you know, when you have anxiety, it's just having a show that just like, I literally laugh out loud when I'm watching it, even though I've seen it a bunch of times. So it's just such a relief and you turn your brain off.
What is there a character that stands out to you? I know they're all amazing.
I mean,
is
Jake,
there someone?
Obviously.
Jake.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think it's the captain for me. He just gets me.
Yeah,
he's just
good.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
And I think they've. Sorry, we should be talking about other things, but with Brooklyn Nine-Nine,
yeah.
I think they have some of the best cold opens on any TV show. They're just phenomenal.
I know.
So
I wish they went longer.
Okay. Are you spiritual? Do you believe in God or a higher power?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yeah.
All right. It's just a straight yes.
Yes,
okay.
A straight yes. I mean, that God, yes, I would say that I'm a woman of faith and I believe in God and I look to him to guide me.
And is that something that you've had your entire life, or is it something that you've come
into
I
would say,
or discovered?
You know, not to touch on too much, you know, with religion, but I just was raised Catholic, which I felt was very, you know, rule-based and, you know, it was stand up, sit down, say this. And even in the church, it's like you go to the priest for, you know, there was never a relationship with the actual higher power. And so I went away from it for a long time. And then the last, you know, I want to say 12 years, came back into Christianity and just learning to have a relationship with God himself and going to him and just learning how to trust and have faith and find strength. And so, yeah, it's been woven in throughout my life, but really has become prominent in the last, I would say, like 12 years.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
And it might come up again. Love languages. Have you ever done the love language test?
Yeah.
What were your top two?
I mean, definitely, I am just quality time. Like, if you could just take, you know, half an hour and go for a walk with me and just have a great conversation, that will fill my cup. So it's nice to hear words of affirmation. I do like that as well, because it's nice to hear that you're loved and appreciated by people. But words are easy, you know? Anyone can just throw out words. It doesn't take that much effort, but the quality time just really shows that that person is invested in you and wants to spend time with you and is interested in what you have to say and wants to be connected with you. So that's number one for sure.
The two work really well together, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, words, they can be said quite easily. But then if you marry that up with quality time, then you know that they are not empty words. You know, there's action behind them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Are you a make things happen sort of person, or do you tend to go with the flow or somewhere in between?
Definitely in between. I think that what I've learned is that life is a balance between the two. I think you have to have goals, you have to be driven, you have to take action, but there's also a level of surrender and just knowing that we don't always have control and that I believe that there's a purpose for us. And sometimes what our purpose is isn't necessarily what we have in mind for ourselves or what we want to make happen. And so sometimes you have to surrender that and go with, you know, what is being led to you, but also taking action and the things that you're passionate about as well. So I think it's a balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've managed to get that sort of, I'm not saying you perfected it, but you're walking that tightrope in between the two.
I would say, yeah.
Okay, great. Good. You should be a life coach. What's one compliment that stands out to you? Can you think of a compliment that it kind of ties in with your words of affirmation that you were saying earlier on there?
You know what? I have to just say, anytime that somebody reaches out to me through my Instagram or even a client from the past and just really is so genuinely thankful for just being somebody that's provided them with hope or perspective or value or just learning to love themselves, I think to me that's the best compliment, is just being a light to somebody and knowing that I've made a difference in their life in a positive way.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You mentioned your Instagram channel there. What's the handle?
So
we'll put it in the comments.
Yeah, it's at Diary of a People Pleaser _.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I love the name, by the way.
Thank you.
And we are going to unpack that shortly.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what's a common misunderstanding people might have about you?
You know what? I probably want to say just ditzy, right? I think that sometimes you get pinholes. I've actually had someone, I was having a conversation with them and they said, you're actually a lot smarter than you look. And I was like, well, I think you meant that as a compliment, but it's actually sort of an insult. But I think that sometimes we, do judge a book by its cover, or we might pinhole someone to be something that they're not. And so that's what I think is maybe a misunderstanding.
Okay.
But I'm actually have more depth than I might look.
And you didn't respond violently, so that's a good sign.
No, I'm not a violent person.
And then I wanted to ask you a little bit about routines and mindset.
Yeah.
So I know that a lot of us are trying to build practices and routines.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a specific routine that you follow, or a certain pattern that kind of helps you get through the day in a productive way?
You know what? I wish I could say that I do. I know it's very 2024 to be like, wake up and have your meditation and do all this and that. And I have to say, as a mom of 3 young kids and a dog and a cat and a business and another job, and, there's not a lot of time to have routine and, make the intentions to do certain things. But one thing that I do every single day is get outside. So it's a walk, or like I said, going into the forest, taking the kids to the beach or the lake. I just need to get into nature at least once in the day, because just the air and the change of scenery and moving your body, and that really helps me with my mental health. So that's it for now.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And knowing that helps you with your mental health is probably going to be a lot more powerful for you and a lot more effective than, sticking to okay, I'm going to do yoga for 5 minutes and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that.
Yeah. It can feel sometimes more stressful to feel like you need to add all these, self-care and meanings into your day. And so I think it has to be authentic to where you're at and what your heart is telling you to do in the moment too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So let's talk about courage.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of your insights and I think some of your experiences kind of building that in your own life.
Yeah.
That'd be really good. So if we just take the concept of courage as a whole to start with, what would you say courage means to you?
Courage to me is just doing it scared. So I know that sometimes, when we're courageous, it can be natural and it can be something that we jump into. But a lot of the times we have to build courage, or we develop courage by being fearful, but continuing to walk through it and into it. So I think sometimes courage is just not backing down and not giving up and just moving forward.
Yeah, really well put. Almost like you have to go in courage.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Hey, those cheesy dad jokes. But yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, because I think often we think it's this thing that we have to tack onto ourselves in order to get somewhere, but actually it is facing that very thing that is, scary in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess like being a life coach, we'll get there. All right. Why do you think courage plays an important part in our lives? And you can answer that as a mom, as just a person in life. Like, why do you think it's so important?
I think that it builds resiliency and it builds character and it gives you strength, and it also lets you know what you're capable of. Unless you actually walk through something and face it, you don't necessarily know what you're capable of. Or, sometimes we have a perception of what we think it might be, or our anxiety might tell us, don't do it. It's, all the scary things that are going to happen. And then when you do it and you're like, that was not as bad as I thought at all. So it really gives you great perspective too. So there's so many different reasons why it's important.
I like that you touched on that, because it does. There's this, often there's this thing in front of us that's really scary, and we can't see past it because we're just focused on how we're going to get through that. And then when you get through it and out the other side, I know at least for myself, I'm buzzing. I'm like, I can't believe I got through that, or I can't believe I did that presentation, or whatever it is that's scaring you.
Yeah.
And then there's all this excess energy that just comes out of nowhere, which then moves you forward to want to do the next thing.
Well, that's the thing. And I mean, I know we'll touch on this later, but for a lot of my clients, that's how they feel when they set a boundary, right? It feels very scary. They're intimidated. They've been running from them their whole life. And then when they actually start doing it, it's like the same thing you said. They almost get this like adrenaline rush, and they're just like, that was amazing. And it was actually really powerful and good and helped. And it wasn't as scary as I thought. So I know we'll get into that in a bit, but it definitely ties into recovering from people pleasing as well.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. Before we get into that, your Instagram channel, you mentioned is Diary of a People Pleaser.
Yeah.
It focuses on people pleasing and healthy boundaries, from my understanding. What was your motivation for setting that up?
Yeah.
What drove you in that
Being
direction?
a people pleaser. I was just like, I didn't know. I mean, I recognized to a degree that I was a people pleaser, but I thought it was a good thing, right? I just thought I was really nice, and I liked other people to be happy, and I was very self-sacrificing, which meant that I was like noble, and I just valued other people. And so I thought of it as a good thing, but I didn't realize all the ways that it was robbing me. I was just riddled with anxiety and low self-esteem, and I had no self-worth, and I felt like I wanted to just fit in. So I was scared to be who I truly was, and just all these things. And what that led me to was anxiety, and I coped with alcohol, and I was always focused on trying to get external validation, which is a big problem, and it's never going to fulfill you. And, attention from men, and just all these negative things that I was trying to fill a void, but I didn't know what the void was. So when I finally realized at the end of all these things, and at the root of it was people pleasing, then everything started to make sense. And from there, I started to build. And that's my diary of a people pleaser.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it because it's lived experience.
Yeah.
So, it's not a study that you're doing, although I imagine you would have studied afterwards, but, you're looking at lived experience and sharing that with people moving forward. I have to say, I came across your stuff because it really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an area that I've been looking at, and the words that you use there are almost like you're reading off my page as well.
Yeah.
Looking for that external validation from a partner, or from whatever it is that's out there, and not realizing that there's something within you that is needing some attention.
Yeah.
And actually it's powerful, isn't it? Because once you address it, then you know what you might not know what the problem is, but you know where to start.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I always say to people, if you think of a tree, when you're looking at the tree and all the branches and all the leaves, those are all the ways that people pleasing is showing up in your life, right? So you may have difficulty saying no. You may, never pick the restaurant because you don't want to use your voice. You may try to fit in. You may laugh at stuff that's you don't find funny, but you don't want to stand up for something that goes against the other group, or anxiety, all these different things. But at the root of it, way down, grounded in, is where your people pleasing is coming from, which is fear. And for a lot of people, their childhood and what they were raised in and how they were conditioned, and the reason why they struggle with setting boundaries or being authentic. And so you really have to go down to the roots to figure out how it was conditioned, where it's coming from, and what you are afraid of, and what you're trying to earn through being a people pleaser. And once you can start to identify those things, then you can start to work through them.
That's really interesting. Yeah. I think when because on a surface level, you could say, oh, someone is a people pleaser because they want to be liked, which isn't far from the truth, but it's more than that. And I really like what you said, that it is a deep fear within you that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, we all want to be liked, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's just human nature to want to be liked and to feel loved and to have connection. But it's when you're willing to sacrifice your own self in order to get that, that's when it becomes a problem.
Mm. If I could touch on the Christianity a little bit there, just on this same thread,
Sure.
I think there is a kind of expectation that you're serving others, and that you are. I think there's a quote. I've forgotten the quote, but you lay down your life for your friends.
Yeah.
I think it's from the Book of John, and so there is this sort of message that's coming out that it's about sacrifice. It's about sacrifice. But then when you hear, one of the commandments is to love your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and then to love your neighbor as yourself. Again, we're thinking, we need to sacrifice ourselves for the neighbor. But what's really interesting, and someone brought this up, was that you love your neighbor as yourself, and therefore you need to know how to love yourself first in order to love your neighbor. And I think that's such a missing part. It's a missing component.
Yes. And I think, a lot of people feel this way, and especially in Christianity, there is sort of this conditioning that you need to sacrifice yourself for others and always be helping and always be serving. But really, it's a balance of both. You should be helping other people. You should be, going out of your way to find ways to bring joy and light and love to other people's lives. You should, if you can, pick somebody up and drive them somewhere if you're able to. All those things are all really good things. But like you said, you have to find yourself within there too. So if you are only serving others and you're exhausting yourself and burning yourself into the ground, or your family is paying the price because you're so busy trying to help everybody else, there's consequences for serving too much too. So again, it's about finding a balance, and it's about how can I make sure that I'm taken care of and that my well-being is, a priority, and then also helping other people. Yeah. It never should be at the expense of one or the other, right?
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. But it is easier said than done if you have a tendency to be conditioned in that way. Okay, so if we stay on that thread, if someone is struggling with that, where would you say to start? Where would be a good place to start for them to go within themselves and go, okay, I know I have this issue. It keeps creeping up. I need to do something about it. Before they maybe go for professional counseling or anything, is there anything within themselves that you think they should start to maybe think about?
I think that reflecting on our conditioning is a good place to start, because, people pleasing is conditioned in many different ways. So for one, maybe your caregiver was people pleaser. Maybe they lacked boundaries. They were always giving. They never, stood up for themselves or used their voice or whatever. So that is what was modeled to you. So that's what you did. Maybe you had a caregiver that was, always asking you to put down your boundaries. And, if you did stand up for yourself, they got really angry or got really upset and made you feel like that, you're the root of their upset. And so you start to be like, okay, well then I won't do that. And then all of a sudden they're happy. And so you learn, okay, if I quiet my needs and don't say what I want or what's important to me, because that made them upset, and then when I didn't do that, then they got happy. I've learned now that when I sacrifice myself, it makes other people happy. So it can be in subtle ways like that. You can have a really, explosive parent that you're walking on eggshells around. And so you become hypervigilant and you are people pleasing to try to keep everything calm, keep everything balanced and good, and that you can try to maybe control how other people are going to feel. Like if I act really good and I don't do this, then they're not going to get angry. So you start to learn like you are responsible for controlling the environment so that other people aren't going to get upset. There's so many different ways that people pleasing is rooted. And I think it's really great for people to look inside and see, okay, what were my family dynamics? And not in a blameful way. We're not saying, your parents messed up and they did this and that. They're, coming from the lens of everybody is just on their own journey and nobody really knows what they're doing, and parents are going to make mistakes, and that they didn't know better or whatever. So having that grace in mind, but it's also important to validate your own experiences. You can say, maybe growing up with someone that always made me feel like I wasn't allowed to use my voice. They were comparing me to other people all the time. I never felt good enough. They were only giving me compliments and praising me when I met their standards and expectations. But when I didn't, they didn't give me any sort of love. Maybe that wouldn't be considered trauma for a lot of people because it doesn't feel big and life-changing. But to a degree, it is. And acknowledging that is okay. It's okay to say that really affected me and that really hurt me and that really shaped me in a way. So validating your own experiences is important too, because a lot of people use toxic positivity to say, like, I didn't have it as bad as somebody else, or they had it worse, or I didn't, I wasn't abused or assaulted or whatever. So therefore I shouldn't complain. And I think that's a really dangerous mindset to have. I think that there needs to be validation in your own experiences, even though it might not be as bad as somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I liked what you said in terms of it's not a blame thing if you're looking back.
Yeah.
Because if it's a blame thing, now you're going, okay, this is the reason why I'm the way that I am. Okay. All right. But like you said, none of us know what we're doing. Most parents, most caregivers didn't get a manual. Like they're just trying to feel their way through. Intentions may not have been there, although I appreciate, there are instances where things are, not good and you are dealing with difficult situations. But on the whole, I think when you're looking, just going off what you're saying there, I think when you're looking into why you are the way that you are, or why at least these things are triggering you, it's almost like a scientific investigation so that you can say, okay, now that I know where this is coming from, I can start to look into XYZ, whether that's EFT or hypnotherapy or, prayer disciplines or whatever. But like you can kind of look at it from a distance, from the outside in, going, okay, let me deal with this sensibly.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement. Is what it is, right? You're not looking to blame something. You're not looking for an excuse or an out. It's just an acknowledgement of an understanding. Okay, now I see why I am the way I am. It's okay. It's there's nothing wrong with me. I was conditioned to think this way or feel this way, and now I understand why. And so now I can start to work towards untangling that. And that's the next step, is just, what are you trying to get out of your relationships? Why are you people pleasing? We all have a need that we're trying to meet through people pleasing. Maybe we want to feel loved. Maybe we want to feel admired. We want to feel validated. We want to feel superior even. We want to be saint-like. We want other people to be like, oh, wow, she just does so much for everybody, and really be, so we all have a need that we're trying to meet in why we're people pleasing. And starting to identify what we're trying to get out of it is really, really important. And that takes some self-reflection and some honesty, right? And, sometimes I give this example where I was really going out of my way to serve another person. I was showing up. I was bringing her, food after she had a baby. I was always checking in on her. And it was very one-sided. I felt like I was not getting that back in return. And that should have been the sign right there. I'm like, you're putting way more into this than you're getting back. That's a moment for reflection. But in natural people-pleasing ways, we look at that as, we need to try harder. Like, we're not getting what we need. So if I up it and I do more and try harder, then they will finally start to do that. And so I kept doing it, and still nothing. And now I'm starting to get resentful, which is what happens for a lot of people pleasers, right? We give and give and give and sacrifice, and people will say stuff like, well, I didn't ask you to do that. And that just sends a people pleaser over the edge. Because it's like, but the truth is, they didn't ask you to do that, right? Like, you're doing it because there's something within you that you're trying to get out of this circumstance? And so when I really took a moment to reflect on it, I was like, okay, so this person I went to high school with, and they were the popular girl. And I realized that there was still a teenage version of myself inside that was trying to win the approval and validation of the popular girl. I wanted I wanted everyone to see, like, their friends. And I was just like, wow, I am in my mid-30s and there is still a teenage girl in me that is trying to get the validation of somebody that was popular 20 years ago. Do you know what I mean? But that's my job, to have that self-reflection and see, this is what I'm doing. Like, yes, I am caring and loving, and I did want to help her, but we also have to be honest with ourselves, and that there's selfishly something we are trying to get out of these circumstances. Otherwise, we wouldn't be feeling so resentful that we're not getting back in return. If you're coming from a place of just genuine giving and doing, you do it with the expectation that you don't need anything back. It's like, even if I show up and I do all these things and that person never does it back to me, and I'm okay with that because I still want to do it, that's a healthy place of giving. Doing it with the hope of getting something back in return is people pleasing. And it's not a healthy place to be generous. So we have to look at our own intentions too.
Yeah, that's really important. Yeah. So that's, if we are setting up within ourselves to be transactional, we're already kind of going into this with an expectancy for failure almost. But I think the resentment as well, I think if it starts to build within you, you'll start to project that out. And I really like what you said earlier on in terms of, it's not the other person's fault, really. If you are not able to draw a boundary within yourself to say, actually, this is my cup and this is how much I can give out, but I need to, save a bit for myself as well. That's on us as a people pleaser to then go, hang on a minute. I'm not being very, I might be giving to my neighbor, but I'm not doing myself any justice here.
Yeah. Or it's like, if I'm giving to my neighbor and they're not screaming from the rooftops about how amazing I am because I'm doing all this stuff, or they're not doing it back to me or this or that, then it's like, well, are you really just coming from a place of love and care? No, there's, like you said, it's that transaction. You're looking to get something out. And that's where that self-reflection has to come and say, what am I trying to get out of this and why? Yeah. Because that's our own personal work to do.
Yeah, and I think I would throw into the mix for people listening, it might not be as conscious as that. It might not be at this level where you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do that so I can get this.
Oh, no.
It might be, it might, most of the time it's subconscious.
You have no idea. You just think you're doing something nice.
Yeah.
But when you start to recognize those angry feelings, that resentment, that aggravation, that why aren't they, or how come I always, those are those sort of key things to look out for, where you're like, okay, maybe I should look at, this situation and take a step back and have a little reflection. So it does take work. It does take awareness. It takes effort. And that's why for some people, it's just easier to keep cycling through it, even though they know it's damaging, because it's a journey.
Yeah. And for me, if I can share, I think I've come from a line of them. And so it's a learnt behavior. And so as I'm growing and developing and trying to explore who I am more and more, I didn't just start yesterday, but you know what I'm saying, going down that road, what tends to happen is when I then go back and have conversations, I could be seen as, oh, you're getting a little bit selfish in your old age, or you're kind of, you seem a little bit arrogant, or a little bit of, you're not considering what other people around you are feeling, etc. And you're going, and I think for me, the challenge is always, by default I am, but I need to be able to create and set boundaries within myself so that I can be who I am and turn up in my authentic self, so that I can help others to do the same, or at least when I do give, it will be from a place of my cup being full, not from an empty cup.
Yeah. And you know what? I would argue too that even the thought process of boundaries being selfish is a conditioning that a lot of people experience by somebody that wants them to sacrifice their boundaries. Do you know what I mean? So it comes from a dynamic or a relationship where when that person does set a boundary or does start using their voice a little bit more, the other person that's benefiting from them not doing that is like, whoa, like you're being selfish now, or look at, oh, wow, you've sure changed, or, start drawing out all these things. And then that creates that thought process for the people pleaser is like, oh, whoa, maybe I am being selfish now. And, and they start to backpedal on that. And it's like, no, that person is using that statement as a way to continue to get what they need. And so even just the word selfish is something that does not align with boundaries, because there is nothing selfish about boundaries at all. And in fact, I often will explain to people, when let's say it's your backyard, right? It's your beautiful oasis that you've built. You have orchard, you have a pool, like whatever it is that is special to you. You've created this beautiful place that you like to go and it's comfortable and you have peace. And, there's a fence around it, and that's your property line. And so you do not allow people to just come and set up a tent and start eating all your apples and destroying it. You don't allow all the neighborhood kids to just come and use their pool whenever you want, or for their neighbor to back their truck and dump all their garbage in your yard. No, you feel like you have the authority to say, this is my property. You can't come here and do this. But when it's on our internal property, we don't feel like we have the same authority to say, no, you can't come and just dump all your garbage into my life, or you can't just come and take from me whatever you want and give nothing back in return. So it's so interesting how we're raised to know that physically our property and our home is something that we should defend and value, and no apologies needed, right? You're not selfish if you're not letting someone dump garbage in your backyard. But I'm selfish if I don't want you to comment negatively on my weight and appearance all the time just because you want to. You know what I mean? I think it's a good moment of reflection and be like, why do I feel okay with one and not the other?
Yeah, it's really well put. It's a great analogy as well, because it makes it digestible and easy to understand. And one of my questions was, what would you define as a boundary, which you've kind of addressed there.
Yeah.
And I like the example that you used in terms of like, why is it okay for you to make comments on my appearance or on my personality trait or whatever, if I haven't allowed that in, what could people do who are trying to get better at building boundaries? What would you say to them in terms of where to start, or what kind of things to put into place when you're trying to say to somebody, hey, you've crossed the line here, in a respectful and civil way?
I think that it's really important to acknowledge that for people that generally don't set boundaries, you're not going to just go into an already established relationship where there's been no boundaries for possibly decades and just all of a sudden come with the authority to say how you feel. Like, that is just not realistic. And so I tell people to just start using their voice in small ways. So if your friends are getting together and you're trying to decide where you are going to go for dinner, and normally you don't want to suggest anything because you're like, what if I say to go to this restaurant and then everybody hates it and then they're going to be mad at me because I picked that restaurant? These are the voices that people have to deal with in their head as a people pleaser, right? You're always worried about what the fallout will be if you actually use your voice or people do something for you. And so I just say to find that courage and just say where you want to go. Throw out a suggestion. I want to go to this restaurant. It's not a boundary. You're not changing the dynamics of a relationship, but you're starting to activate your voice and getting a little bit more comfortable with taking up space. So just where you can implement it in your life in small doses, I say start there. Second, maybe there's some, dynamics in your life that are not as close and personal as maybe like a parent relationship or something like that. Maybe you went and got your hair cut and they did a terrible job, and maybe it's okay to go back and say, I came and got my haircut and I'm just really not happy with it. Do you think you can fix it? That's like, gut wrenching for like most people pleasers, right? We would just go find another hairdresser, never speak to them again, like fall off the face of the earth and just run away, right? Because it's easier to run away than it is to actually face that person and have an honest conversation. So it's finding the courage to actually start using your voice, even though it's uncomfortable. Like, you have to know it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to give you anxiety. It's going to be overwhelming. That's part of the process. but doing it anyways, you know? And once you start to see like, okay, I said that I wanted to go to the restaurant, it wasn't that bad. The hairdresser she was so happy to help, and she was so glad that I told her because her business is important to her, and she thanked me. It's like, okay, that was not as bad as I thought. You know, when we start doing it and we start seeing the positive results of it, it starts to give us a little bit more confidence. And so that's where I say to start. And, you know, the other stuff is going to take time to work up into. It's going to take some reconditioning. It's going to take some practice. I always tell people, you know, if there's a specific person in your life in a specific area that you want to set a boundary, write it out, practice it in your head, have a fake conversation about it. You know, preparation is key, because for people pleasers, what gets us caught up is when people come at us with something that we're not expecting. And we sort of have a tendency to withdraw and go inside because we're not prepared for that, or we don't know how to stand up for ourselves or use our voice. And so I say, like, you know, practice the scenario. What if they say this? What will I say back? What if they say this? What will I say back? You know, have all these in your head so that when that happens, you're not caught off guard. You're like, okay, I saw this coming and this is how I had planned to respond. Preparation is super important, in my opinion. And just knowing that it may be hard. The other person might not be receptive at first. You have to consider that relationships play on dynamics for a really long time. And so if you're going to come into something and try to change that, even the healthiest, most loving person might have a bit of a negative reaction to start with. And so we have to allow grace for the other person to also have a moment to be like, where's this coming from? Like this, you've never said this before. Why, you know, and that's okay. But the important thing is that they come around and they say, okay, I realize now that this is really important to you. And because I care about you, I want to respect that. And knowing that sometimes that won't happen. Sometimes you will be met with guilt trips and gaslighting and victimizing and all that kind of stuff. So knowing that that's not your responsibility and that's not your fault, and that's that other person's job to learn how to manage their own reactions and how to have a healthy conversation. And you can't control that.
Yeah, that's good. I think two things I'd like to pull out there as well is if you do enforce a boundary, or maybe not even enforce, but you communicate a boundary, and then the other person says, oh, based on your boundary, I'm now going to adjust my boundary. There is an onus on us, the person who initiated, to go, okay, I need to be able to respect that as a response. This person also wants to put in a boundary that's right for them, and then not to freak out and go, oh my gosh, as a people pleaser, I've just ruined the relationship. I need to like readjust myself, etc., etc. It's kind of having that respect to say, okay, I respect your boundary too. Okay, let's see how that dynamic now will change and how we can work with that.
That's it. And I think that that's the intention behind a boundary. I always tell people, because boundaries, it does sound harsh, right? Boundaries, it sounds like a wall, or that you're trying to be rude or push people away. And that's not what it is. It's with the intention of creating healthier relationships, and where both people feel valued and respected and loved, and that it's even. And I think that when we go in with that intention on both sides, that's how you create beautiful friendships, relationships, everything. Like for me, where I'm at in my life, I want to know where my friends' boundaries are. You know, I want them to be able to communicate to me and say, I don't like this, or I don't like when you talk about this, or this is really important to me, because I don't want to be not respecting them without realizing it. And B, I want to have an honest relationship. I want them to feel like they can tell me how they feel and that we can be honest with each other. And I just you know, as a recovering people pleaser, you don't want to be worrying, is someone mad at me? Did I do something? Like now they're not really talking to me as much. Like what did I do? You know, boundaries is just very clear communication so that everybody is comfortable and happy. And so with that in mind, it's really just an encouraging thing. It's an exciting thing to be able to have boundaries in the relationship on both sides.
And it makes a lot of sense, because psychologically speaking, if you look at other dynamics and other aspects of life, school, for example, rules need to be put into place.
Yeah.
Classes need to be defined. Activities need to be defined, and within that structure then there is an element of freedom and liberty and security and playfulness and etc. So we do see this play out in lots of different areas in life, but there's something about the way that we relate to each other that it's quite easy to throw that out the window and just kind of have a free-for-all, which is then when things start to get messy, because those boundaries aren't in place.
Yeah. And I think it's learning to tune into your own authentic self as well and what's important to you, because a lot of the times we are raised on a conditioning where maybe we start to get confused about, because somebody else isn't offended by this or because they think it's okay, then I should too. When really, when we look at it, it's like, okay, maybe you don't mind when other people do this to you, but for me, I don't like it. And that's okay. It's okay that I'm allowed to feel different. It's okay that it bothers me and it might not bother you. So we have to start to learn authentically what we like and don't like, and know that it's going to be different for other people, and feeling confident to be able to express that and stand in it. Yeah.
And I think zooming out as well, like we'll pick that up in relationships that we have with caregivers or other people that we've met along the way, maybe a best friend group at school, etc. I think you brought up the popular girl earlier on, but those kinds of things. But I think, again, zooming out, if you look at society as a whole, we consume a lot of media.
Yeah.
And if I just take the classic, Ross and Rachel were on a break on Friends, and you think, okay, that was okay or not okay, whichever camp you sit on, it's almost like conditioning you to think a certain way without you knowing what you actually feel about that, if that happened to you in real life. And so it happens on a mass scale.
Yeah.
So you pick up these, oh, that must be okay because this particular character is supposed to be a hero. And, I'm moving away from Friends, but any other kind of TV show or movie, you see this character and then you start to project yourself onto that character, and you start to think, well, if it was okay for that person, then it's okay for me. I should be able to carry this much weight, or I shouldn't be, the positive, what was it, the toxic positivity you were saying earlier on, then if they've been able to do that, I could do that. So there's so many different avenues that this can start entering into you, and it's about kind of filtering that out for yourself.
And just to touch on the Ross and Rachel thing, it just kind of jarred something in my mind, but something that my clients experience is that they think that they're setting a boundary and they are, spiraling because other people aren't respecting it. But when we actually break down their communication, they weren't actually setting a boundary. A request or gentle hints or tiptoeing around, those aren't boundaries. Sometimes we think we're saying, what we want or what we need or not to do something, but we're saying it in such a delicate and hintful way that the other person is not actually picking it up. And so when we start to identify, like, how are you communicating and are you being clear, then they're like, oh, well, no, I didn't actually do that. So it's the same thing as like, we're on a break. Well, there wasn't really clear communication there, and saying like, I don't really like it when you do that. And like, I would really love it if you would stop or whatever. It's like, that's not a boundary. You're asking somebody else if they would mind to maybe not do something. And you're leaving it up to them to decide if they want to not do it or not. A boundary is saying, like, I'm not going to tolerate this, or I don't like this and you need to stop. It is very clear.
I mean, look, just hearing how clear that is as well can be really uncomfortable, because you're like, okay, I'm creating conflict because of something that I don't want to happen or do want to happen. And therefore I'm creating drama. I'm not saying this is a healthy way to think. I'm just, what starts to come up is like, I'm actually creating a problem when there isn't a problem. And then all the flags go up, the anxiety starts to rise.
I know. Going on? And trust me, I know, because like you said, I've walked this myself. And that was something that I was very hard on myself and strict about, was that if I'm going to talk the talk and encourage people and guide people and help people, I have to be doing it in my own life. So trust me, anything that I'm asking anybody to do, I've faced myself through the discomfort and I've been like, oh, I don't want to do this, but I made myself. So I know exactly what it feels like. But what I ask people to do is consider that you don't set that boundary. And, what are things going to look like in a month? What are things going to look like in 6 months? What are things going to look like in a year? So if there's a friend or a dynamic or something happening and you're fearful of setting that boundary because you don't want to start drama or change the relationship or this or that, start to play out, what is that relationship going to look like if I don't set this boundary? What is this situation going to look like if I don't speak what I need? If I allow somebody to keep commenting negatively on my weight, in a year from now, like, how am I going to feel about myself and how am I going to feel about that other person? How is that going to affect our friendship? Because I'm certainly not going to want to go out of my way to hang out with someone that's going to make me feel that way. And so I'm probably going to draw away from them, and the relationship is going to be affected either way. And so I would rather communicate how I feel, say what I need, and see where that other person's going to meet me. Because if they're going to be someone that's not able to respect me and they're not able to respect my boundaries and they're not able to understand where I'm coming from or want to work with that, then I have to look at, do I really want to have a friendship or a relationship with that person anyways? I would rather make space in my life for people that are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I was doing that or that you felt that way. And like, I totally understand. I will not do that again. Those are the kind of people I want in my life, but you're never going to know where people are going to land if you don't actually set the boundary.
Yeah, right? Really good. Really good. And it sounds so simple, us talking about it like this.
Yeah.
When you're out there in the trenches, it's like, the bullets are flying at you in so many ways, and it is about getting those shields in the right positions.
Yeah, and about having support too. And that's why, I do offer coaching, or there's other coaches or counselors out there, depending on where you live in the world. But it's like having somebody that you can gain strength from while you're walking through. So, you plan things out and you prep, and then you go into battle, and then you're able to like come back to that other person and debrief and get your head back on right, because it can be very disoriented when you're used to living a certain way and acting a certain way, and then all of a sudden you flip things up and then it didn't go the way you want, and now you feel like you're sort of spiraling. So it is important to have another person to come back to and to debrief and self-reflect and, maintain that confidence and your whys for why you're doing it, so that you can continue forward.
Yeah. Because when all those emotions are flying off everywhere, it's good to have an anchor to say, hey,
Yeah, and it's confusing, and we start to doubt ourselves too. Like, did I just make a mistake? Am I being selfish? Am I this? Am I that? We really start to spiral.
Yeah. And you said that, am I making a mistake? And like, none of us get it right all the time. And going back to your analogy about the garden, I think it's the book Boundaries, and he talks about a fence that gets built. So let's say we make a mistake. Me and you are neighbors. There's your garden, there's my garden, and you've created a boundary line, which is great, but your boundary line has gone a couple of inches over onto my property. And then it's up to me to come and say, hey, I think you've kind of misstepped here. And then so there's adjustment there. There's a bit of give and take. There's wiggle room. It's just not like, okay, done. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah. And you know what? We're going to make mistakes. And a lot of my clients, they start to get, very empowered, and they start to get like a little bit angry because they're starting to process all of this pain and hurt and things that they've been stuffing down for years and years and even decades. And like, so now they're just kind of pissed, right? They're just like, now I'm mad that I've been letting people do this to me. And so sometimes the pendulum can swing way onto the other side, right? So sometimes we like, don't say anything, and we people please, and we really sacrifice. And then we go, and then we're being a bit aggressive, and we're assuming that everybody's trying to cross our boundaries and hurt us. And so it may go back and forth, and really you want to find like the balance in the middle. But it's a process and a journey. And I think that it's important to just have humility throughout the process too. Like, even in my own journey, I maybe set a little bit of a hard boundary, or I just didn't communicate it the way that, like, after I was reflecting on it, I thought, okay, maybe that sounded a little bit harsh. And so I apologized. And I said, I'm just still like getting used to expressing my needs and communicating how I feel. It's really uncomfortable for me. And I feel like I came on too strong, and so I want to apologize for that. And that is okay. You can do that. If you make a mistake, or even you come on too strong, part of the beautiful relationship is being humble and being able to just acknowledge that and make a mistake. And the other person's like, okay, yeah, no problem. I get it. And again, it's all trust building and respect building.
Yeah. And kind of linking that to something you said earlier on in terms of, and if the person isn't able to forgive you or to have that space for you or to, continue a relationship, then, that's information for you to go, well, actually, maybe that's not the type of person I want to be able to move forward with. And we had a great time and, I respect the time that we had, but now it's time to move on and continue my journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Or, deprioritizing people, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean, depending on the interaction, and obviously you need...
Yeah, I was being a touch dramatic with my example.
Well,
but yeah.
No, but I mean, there are people, I've been, in a situation with somebody where I did set a boundary or communicate, and they did all the toxic stuff, like turning it back on me, victimizing themselves, gaslighting me, being passive aggressive, never apologizing, all the stuff. And so I was like, I don't need this kind of person in my life. So that was like a clear for me removal. But, sometimes people aren't going to do all those things, but they still might not be able to give us what we're hoping to get out of the relationship. And so that's okay. But maybe you're just changing them from a level 1 friend to like a level 4 friend, right? So it's like for my level 1 friends, I expect them to, be honest with me, to think of me, to prioritize me, to communicate with me, have healthy boundaries on both sides. That's what I want to give, and that's what I want to get back. And then maybe the level 4 friend, someone that you just see every couple months and you go for coffee and you hang out with and you catch up, but it's not that deep. And so sometimes we can just change our level of expectation for friendships and just move them around accordingly as well. We don't necessarily have to cut off everybody all the time, right? So it's all individual and circumstantial.
It's really interesting because this has been I've been going through a bit of a tough, I say a bit of a tough, it's been excruciatingly painful, I'm not going to lie, the last kind of year and a half. And one of the things I noticed about myself is when we're talking about, and I'm just using this as an example, but like the level 1, the level 2, I kind of came to the realization that I have level 1 friends and maybe acquaintances, and that's it. But the number of people that are in that bracket is not, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And so had something go on that then started to show me, oh, hang on a minute, these friends are not actually showing signs of grace and love and acceptance. Even if there's a disagreement or whatever, that's fine. I'm happy to be called out and stuff. And then it started to, really get me into a place of, okay, I really need to, I can't project that resentment onto everyone. That's something within me. That's a me issue. That's not a them issue. That's okay, where does this person sit with me? And now, and I used to, I'm not that you're my therapist, but I used to throw in, I used to throw this thing at people when they were like, oh yeah, if someone who has loads of friends doesn't have real friends. I think there's some kind of saying, and I used to be like, no, that's not true. Like there's exceptions, etc. And sadly, over time you go, wow, there's actually there's a profound truth in that, and it's not supposed to be malicious in nature, that quote, but or that saying, but actually there's a lot of truth to it. So now I'm seeing my circle go from like here down to here, but the here is so beautiful. It's like grace like you've never seen. It's like real authentic connection. And it's a beautiful thing.
And you know what, and more can join, and I think that's the beautiful part of creating this special circle that you have to really work hard to get into, is that the quality of people that you're looking for. And so more people can come and you'll know the quality of the person, because the more upfront you are, the more, comfortable with boundaries you are, all those kinds of things, you'll know if those are your people. And so you can still meet more people like that. It's just that there's not going to be all that dead weight, and it's not going to be so squished, and those people can't get in because of all the other toxic people that are like taking up all the space, right? And I think that's another conditioning that has to be really, I don't know, I would love for people to reflect on it a little bit more. I feel like with social media and with media and movies and all that kind of stuff, there's always been an emphasis on popularity, right? I think no matter when you grew up, there's always been an emphasis on the more popular you are, the better you are. And popular means lots of friends and lots of people. And I think that the lucky ones of us that as they age start to realize what you just realized, that I would rather have less people in my life and have less friends. I'd rather have 2 friends that are just super amazing than have 20 friends who suck. You know, I can let go of needing to be like popular and needing to feel like that gives me some sort of validation, and just be happy with the authentic relationships that I have.
Yeah. Totally agree with that.
Good stuff.
I want to move on to a little bit of your personal story in terms of courage that you've had to go through. I think we shared a little bit about anxiety and how you kind of try to navigate that with unhealthy inputs, outputs. I don't know how you would phrase that.
Yeah.
Well, could you speak into a little bit of that? Where were you at, and what kind of courage did you have to kind of like summon up to be able to move forward through it?
Yeah.
Or any realizations that you had along the way?
Yeah. I just, you know, with each child, I just got more anxious. And so for my last one, my postpartum anxiety was just really bad. And I didn't really know why I was feeling unhappy, but I felt like I just wasn't good enough. I felt like I didn't have enough friends. I felt like, you know, just all these things that we tell ourselves, right? And so I was so tired of being inauthentic. And I was getting to a place where even on my own Instagram account, I didn't feel like I could even post a picture of just myself without my kids, because I was so afraid that people were going to be judging me. I was so afraid. I was creating all these narratives in my head of what other people would supposedly be saying if I posted a picture like, oh, look at her. She thinks she's all that. She's so conceited. Oh, blah, blah, blah. And so I was just cowering in fear all the time about things that weren't even real. They were just all created in my head. And so I just got so sick of it. And I thought, I just want to be real. And in order to do that, I think I need to create a space where it's just new for me. I don't think I can grow and put myself out there around all these other people that already know me. And so I just got really excited about creating a brand new Instagram account where I could just be authentically myself. And so Diary of a People Pleaser started as Diary of a Real Me. And it was just a place where I could be myself. I could say how I was feeling. I could post a picture of myself and not, like, you know, nobody knows me, right? I don't care what strangers think of me. So it was just like a great space to just start practicing authenticity. And that's how the journey really began for me. And I was just wanting to be myself and talk about real things that I'm feeling without worrying about the judgment of other people. And that's how I grew. Because I feel like sometimes when we think we're under a microscope of judgment, we stay really small and we hide.
Right.
And I really wanted to just shine a light on myself and just be who I really was. And through that, I just really got into self-development and, you know, understanding, you know, how much of people-pleasing really was the root cause of all the feelings that I was having. It's because I wasn't allowing myself to just be who I was and say what I wanted to say and have a voice and feel like I was important enough to have a voice. I think that's what a lot of people-pleasers don't feel like they're important enough to take up space. They feel like they have to stay really small. And they're afraid what will happen if they take up more space or ask for more for other people. And so that was really the turning point for me. And, you know, I have 11 years sobriety now, and I'm in such a place where I just wouldn't want it even if I could have it. You know what I mean? I love being who I am. I love the clarity. I don't have any reason to escape anymore. And that's what I was finding. Like, I just always wanted to escape all the feelings and the life that I was living. And I just think it's really important for people to create a life that you don't want to escape from.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that a lot. There's so much you've said there. That's so good. I'm thinking about someone who's listening who maybe is turning to alcohol, just as an example, to mask or at least kind of, you know, avoid the anxiety that's within them. What Was there a moment for you? Was there something that said to you, right, I'm not going to turn to this anymore. I'm going to go in this particular direction? Because I know we've talked about how the channel started, and in fact, if I could just say, I love the point that Instagram, which tends to be seen as, oh, it's a terrible thing, it's like making people go in this direction, for you actually had a different a different outcome, because you used it in a way that really addressed, this is me, this is who I am. So yeah, I just want to make that point real quick. But in terms of the alcohol, in terms of like, if someone was listening, what would your, for someone with lived experience, what would you say to them? What would you want them to take away?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand. So for me, I got sober first. So it wasn't, something that as I worked through all these things, I decided that my life was just better without it and I didn't need it anymore. I think for a lot of people that are using anything, it doesn't even need to be alcohol. It can be shopping. It can be food. It can be anything. But
sugar, cakes.
Yeah. That's something I need to work on. But basically, you're just using that as something to escape what you're feeling. And so when you remove that thing, you are forced to look at it. When I took the alcohol away, there was no more masking or numbing. It was just like a big, bright, painful, and uncomfortable light. And that is how I started to uncover things and work through it. So, I mean, I would just say start. Just start getting curious, start exploring, start counseling, start talking to somebody. Every journey doesn't have to be the same, I mean, obviously, if you're abusing drugs or alcohol and it's a dangerous situation and you know that you're powerless and out of control and it's affecting your life, then obviously that's something that you're going to want to look at and stop. But, if you're just using it as a way to like numb out and cope, I would just say just start the process. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do everything in order of somebody else. You don't have to reach this level before you can move to this level. You just have to start taking the steps.
That's good. That's really helpful. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing a little bit about what you had to go through there. Are there any individuals who come to mind as catalysts for growth in your courage journey? So I guess what I'm trying to do here, or I'm trying to say in a fancy way, is there anyone you want to shout out to say, do you know what, this person really helped me out, on my journey?
You know what? I mean, they're not going to hear it, but the holistic psychologist, I'm not sure if you follow her on Instagram. I mean, she's huge, but I read her book, her first book, and she was the one that taught me to validate my own trauma. And trauma is not something that I would have used to describe my childhood, my experiences, how I was raised, the love of my parents, all that kind of stuff. But I knew there was stuff. There was things that impacted me. There was a reason why I was a people pleaser and struggled so much. And actually in codependency as well. So people pleasing, similar to codependency in a lot of ways, but codependency is a bit deeper in terms of really sacrificing your own self for somebody else. Not just to make them happy, but just to try to like save them almost, or love through their pain. So I had to know that there was a reason why I was the way I was, and that it was okay to say, I can still have a loving home and loving parents and a really great childhood, but there was also things that weren't perfect and did affect me. And until I was able to really validate that in myself and stop running from it and stop toxic positivitying myself into knowing that other people had it worse and that I shouldn't even really complain, then I wasn't able to really move forward. I just kept staying stuck in this cycle. And when I started to acknowledge these things without blame, then I was able to understand. So thank you, holistic psychologist.
Yes, big shout out.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look up that account to see if I'm familiar. I might even already be following. I don't know.
I mean, she's huge, but yeah.
Okay. All right. And this is kind of more of a general thing, yeah. But you can bring in your life experience and anyone that potentially you've worked with as a life coach if something comes up. But what would you say to someone who's really struggling with fear? And when I say fear, maybe, intense anxiety. What do you think they should do in terms of prioritizing their self development, getting started?
I think that it's just, you're going to be anxious either way. You're going to be scared either way. And so what do you want your life to look like on the other side of that fear is really a good question that I think deserves some reflection. For me personally, I was anxious and am anxious, and setting boundaries was hard for me, and starting to use my voice and feel empowered was very uncomfortable. But I knew what I wanted my life to look like. And I knew, I think deep down, I think we all know that we have worth and value. And I think that we've let other people shatter that or diminish it or make us question it. But I think that deep down, we all know that intrinsically we just have value as human beings, and that we're allowed to be happy, and we're allowed to be happy in our own life, I think is the most important thing, right? Like this is your life. And so what's on the other side of that anxiety? And what do you want your life to look like? And do it scared.
And do it scared. Yeah. I think a little thread that I'm seeing here is with the boundaries, with people pleasing, and then the question here is, what do you want your life to look like? On the other side of this fearful thing or this anxiety. And the link that I'm making there is you kind of have to know what you want. Like, what is it that you want? Because if you don't know what you want, then you're putting up boundaries, or you're, addressing things for what reason? Because it's the right thing to do, or you think you ought to do it, or et cetera, et cetera. But if you actually know what you want from your life, and it doesn't have to be like a detailed, like 10-year plan or anything, but this is what I would like. I would like a peaceful house. How do I deal with that? Or I would like a career that is fulfilling. How do I, navigate that?
Or even if you're not even sure what you want, because I think that can be a barrier for people, start to acknowledge and recognize what you don't want. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't want my partner treating me this way. I don't want my relationship to look like this. I don't want. And, starting to become aware of all those things that you don't want and how much of those things that you don't want are in your present life will help drive you towards making a choice for something different.
Yeah, that's really well put. Because we're told, don't focus on the thing that you don't want to do. But when you put it like that, it actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because there is so much in the world. And I'm not pointing fingers at the world. I'm just saying, I think we're human nature, right? We're fallen in many ways. I think that it's okay to say these are the things I don't want in my space, in my house, in my heart, in my mind, etc.
Yeah, and by acknowledging what you don't want, it helps make it clear what you do. So if you just don't know where to start, or what you want your life to look like, or how to even move, that's just a place to start to push you in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It's been really good talking to you today.
Yeah, it's been great. I could go on for another hour.
I know, I definitely could. And I wanted to say, like, on your channel, I noticed that you are sort of discussing narcissism a little bit more.
Yep.
If I could ask you the question of, is there a link between people pleasing and narcissism? Does a narcissist tend to... I've done a couple of episodes on narcissism, so I'm not doing a deep dive with you right now. But do you think that a people pleaser is more likely to lean towards someone with a narcissistic kind of personality trait, let's say?
Yeah, I would say that people that find themselves stuck repetitively with narcissistic personalities, I mean, being in a relationship with a narcissist can happen to anybody. Like, you can be a very strong, independent person with a lot going for you and have no problem with boundaries, but they do it in such a meticulous and sneaky way and they weave it so carefully that they start to take things away and manipulate and abuse you in a way that you don't even really see it happening. And so you know, I would say that people that stay stuck in them longer, or who maybe find themselves repetitively attracting this type of person, are people who have people pleasing and codependency. And it really just stems from a place of lacking boundaries or lacking follow through on boundaries. Sometimes we'll say, like, it's not okay for you to treat me this way, and if you do that again, like, this isn't going to work. And then they do it again, and then you forgive them and move on. Like, you've just taught them at that point that they can just do whatever they want and you're not going to go anywhere. So it's follow through as well. And wanting to see the best in another person, and wanting to, well, for a codependent, I would say it's like, seeing that maybe that person had childhood trauma, or maybe there's pain deep down, and that's why they're doing it. And so they allow all these reasons and excuses to justify the behavior and stay stuck in it, right? And sacrifice themselves. And a people pleaser, sometimes people pleasers really are conditioned to earn, right? It's like I had to earn like respect and admiration and approval and all these things when I was a kid. And so this narcissist is giving me breadcrumbs, and now I'm like trying to earn more, and like trying to, if I just do this, and if I change this, and if I work harder, then they will. And so you can kind of get stuck in those cycles as well. So yeah, to answer your question in a really long way, I would say anybody can fall into a narcissistic relationship, but the people that find themselves stuck in them longer, maybe, or in a repetitive cycle of it, are generally those who are people pleasing and codependence and just lack boundaries overall. A little bit of self-esteem issues. Yeah.
I've been reading a book called Attached, so learning about attachment styles and things like that. And I'm not saying every people pleaser is anxious by nature, but you start to see a pattern of behavior and the way that we're attached to someone who's maybe more avoidant in nature. But what I really like about the attachment style theory is that it's not a fixed state. So you can start to move towards a secure attachment if you're willing to do the work. And some of that is around what we've been talking about today, and addressing the people pleasing, where it's come from, how to kind of work through triggers that arise and things like that. So it's not like a clean, like, do this step, and then you'll be over there. But there's a whole range of like movement that, and work that needs to be done. But I guess what I'm trying to communicate there is that there is hope. There is a way forward.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope that I, present that, because that was me. I was just a very shell of a person, scared, like just afraid to be authentic, afraid to be me, and using all these negative things to cope with that, to who I am today. I'm strong, I'm empowered, I'm confident, but I know my value and my worth, but I also know that I'm not for everybody. And I'm okay with that, because I don't need other people's validation and approval anymore. The one that I want to feel good about is from my own self, And so I just really hope that I can be an example of that change, and that really anybody who's a people pleaser can become a recovering people pleaser, which means that it's still going to live within you, and it's still going to be a tendency that you're going to want to lean towards, or you're going to maybe accidentally in a moment go back to the way that you used to do it. Like, it's never going to just fully be gone, but it can be less present in your life, and that can just be an older version of yourself that you aren't anymore. So change is possible.
It is possible, and then we become living testimonies of that ourselves. So just to throw into the mix that the reason for Going Courage was that I really struggled with anxiety 20 years ago, panic attacks and things like that. And doing something like this would I would have to prepare for like 6 months in order just to come and do something like this, and then freak out for like a couple of days afterwards and be exhausted, etc. It's the more that you keep doing something, the more it becomes second nature to you, the more you turn up authentically. Like for me, Going Courage is it's just who I am. I'm a curious guy by nature. I love talking to people and kind of learning from people's real world experiences as well. And the reason I'm saying all that is, there is hope. There is a way forward. There is, I don't think I've arrived at where I want to be, and I'm sure there's stuff I haven't even dreamed of that I'm going to, walk into and explore and experience. But knowing that, it's a journey and there is a way forward always. It just has to come from a place of faith and hope and courage. It provides a good vibe for all of us, good energy for everyone.
Yeah. And congratulations to you, because you've overcome something that was really just holding you down and weighing you down and preventing you from just being who you really are to where you're sitting today. So that is just such a big accomplishment. So just congratulations to you, and hope you take that time to acknowledge yourself as well.
Yes, high fives all around. Yeah. But, I wasn't trying to take it away from what we were saying in terms of like just being that that testament, like for yourself as well. Like we've just, we've met a couple of times now, but in terms of like people who've lived with you, seen you grow up and go, hang on, that's she's really come a long way. Yeah. And again, it's not coming from that people pleasing, oh yeah, look at me, I've done a really good job. But it comes from do you know what? If she could do it, or if he could do it, maybe there's hope for me as well. And I think that's the beautiful thing that we all aspire to do for other people. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for having me. Is there somewhere people could get in touch with you? I know you talked about Instagram. Is there anywhere else that you'd like people to just kind of jump on if they wanted to know more about you? Yeah, I do have a website. So www.diaryofapeoplepleaser.com. So you can find information there about my coaching, my workshops, and just even send me a message as well. And on Instagram, people DM me all the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions or provide clarity on things or just be a general encouragement in people's lives. So you can reach out anytime. Excellent. And thank you, because that's what I did. I DM'd you and you responded, and we had this great podcast out of it. Excellent. With your coaching, is that in Vancouver or is it kind of internationally because of the internet and you're doing sort of video kind of stuff? Yeah, exactly. It can be virtual, so it can be anywhere. We can make it work. Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thanks again for being on today. I'm so appreciative again of your time. I know it's like early in the day where we're recording, so I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Nothing but thanks. Okay. So if you're listening here today, you know where to connect with Diary of a People Pleaser on Instagram and then the website as well. If you want to know more about Going Courage, you can do so on goingcourage.com as well. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're facing, our message today to you is to keep moving forward and keep going in courage. We'll see you next time. I really hope you enjoyed that episode today, and I hope that Brianne was able to bring something to the table that was beneficial for your journey with people pleasing, setting boundaries. And I know we touched on narcissism a little bit there as well. Just a reminder that I have had 2 episodes in the relationship series earlier that you can find. One was with Tiara Thomas and the other one was with Amy Goff. So do look into those as well if narcissism is an area that is affecting your life at the moment. All right, so before I go, I just want to remind you that the Courage Journal has been published and it is available in Amazon, on Amazon, order from Amazon. Links are on the website at www.goingcourage.com, so go and check that out. And the short version is that it's a 31-day prompted journal to help you build courage over that time period. And then once again, if you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel on YouTube and all the other places, because it really does help the algorithms and work their magic and help these episodes and this content reach the right people. All right, so with all of that said, I hope whatever you're doing in life, you're facing your fears, or at least attempting to, and trying to move forward and doing so with courage. I'll see you on the next episode.